Admiral Veltar's massive crystalline body pulsed with deep blue light, each flicker revealing his growing panic. The holographic display before him showed another red marker. The Aelios colony, home to 12 million souls, had gone dark just 3 hours ago. That made it the fourth system to fall to the Vectar swarm in less than a month. "Show me the final transmission again," he ordered, his voice creating harmonic frequencies that made nearby equipment vibrate. The recording played across the command center's main screen. Screaming colonists ran through burning streets while massive insectoid creatures the size of hover tanks tore through defensive barriers like paper. The Vectar drones moved with terrifying coordination, their acid saliva dissolving anything in their path. The last image showed a warrior-caste Vectar, standing 12 feet tall with razor-sharp mandibles, staring directly into the camera with compound eyes that held disturbing intelligence. "Sir, we're receiving distress call from the Arcturus mining station," reported Lieutenant ZYXI, his forearms working frantically across multiple control panels. "They are requesting immediate evacuation. Long-range sensors show a swarm fleet of over 300 bioships heading their way." Veltar's form dimmed with despair. The bioships were living creatures the size of battle cruisers, grown rather than built, capable of traveling faster than most coalition vessels. Each one carried thousands of Vectar warriors in specialized breeding chambers. Worse yet, the ships could literally eat enemy vessels, dissolving hull plating with concentrated acid sprays before boarding. "Send emergency broadcast to all coalition member worlds," he commanded. "Priority Alpha. We need every available warship and ground force unit immediately." The communications array, a beautiful spiral of living coral that served as the station's main transmitter, began pulsing with urgent messages. Within an hour, responses flooded in from across the galaxy. The Krillian Empire responded first. Their warriors stood 9 feet tall with natural armor plating and strength that could crush steel, but their message was brief. "Our forces are committed to the Rigel sector conflict. Cannot assist." The technological marvel that was the Zephian Collective sent detailed battle analysis data along with their refusal. Probability calculations indicate 97.3% casualty rate against Vectar forces. "Mission deemed unsurvivable. We decline." Even the warrior priests of the Felurian Order, known for their fearless charges into impossible battles, send their regrets. "Our honor-bound duty requires us to defend the sacred worlds. May the ancestors guide your path." One by one, every major military power in the galaxy found reasons to avoid the Vectar swarm. The reptilian Sorak spoke of prior commitments. The energy-based Lumina claimed their weapons were ineffective against chitinous armor. The machine intelligence known as a synthesis calculated that sacrificing forces would not alter the strategic outcome. Veltar watchers hope drain away with each refusal. The Coalition controlled over 400 worlds, commanded fleets that could glass planets, wielded technology that bent the laws of physics, yet none of it seemed to matter against an enemy that treated advanced weaponry like a mild irritation. "So," Lieutenant ZYXI's voice carried a note of confusion. "We have one more response from the Outer Rim territories." A new hologram materialized, a bipedal creature with pale skin, strange patches of fur only on its head, and tiny eyes that somehow seemed alert and intelligent. The being wore what appeared to be a simple military uniform with minimal technological augmentation. "This is Captain Fletcher Knox of the Terran Defense Force," the creature said in a clear, steady voice. "We receive your distress call. We have the 82nd Airborne Battalion ready for immediate deployment, 800 combat personnel, full equipment load, and transport capability. We can be at your coordinates in 7 to 2 hours. Veltar stayed at the transmission. "Terran? I've never heard of this species." Computer, display their world classification. Data scrolled across his personal screen. Earth, a Class 12 death world in an unremarkable star system. The classification made his crystalline structure actually crack slightly in shock. Class 12 meant a world so hostile that most coalition species would die within hours of exposure. Extreme weather, dangerous predators, toxic atmosphere composition, unstable geology, and something called tectonic activity that made the planet's surface constantly shift and break. "These creatures live on a world that would kill our finest warriors just from breathing the air," whispered his aide. "How can they possibly help against the Vectar?" But as Veltar watched the human captain's calm, confident expression, something stirred in his thoughts. Perhaps creatures who survived on such a nightmare world might have developed unusual capabilities. Accepted, he replied to the transmission. Proceed to Kepler Station immediately. We'll provide you with full tactical briefings and equipment specifications upon arrival. The human nodded once, apparently some form of agreement gesture, and the transmission ended. Veltar turned to his command staff, noting their skeptical expressions. Desperate times call for desperate measures, he announced. Alert all stations. We have reinforcements coming from Terra. The human transport vessels emerged from hyperspace like ghosts materializing in the void. Admiral Veltar watched from Kepler Station's observation deck as three bulky, rectangular ships approached at what seemed like a painfully slow pace. Compared to the sleek, organic curves of coalition vessels that flowed through space like living creatures, the human ships looked like flying metal boxes held together with welds and prayer. Those are military vessels, asked Commander Frixkai, his insectoid mandibles clicking with disbelief. The Mantry officer's compound eyes tracked the approaching ships with obvious concern. They appeared to be cargo haulers. Veltar's crystalline form pulsed with uncertainty. The human ships had no visible weapon systems, no energy shields shimmering around their hulls, no gravitational field generators that allowed for graceful maneuvering. They moved with simple chemical thrusters, leaving trails of exhaust that would be visible to enemies from several star systems away. Perhaps their weapons are concealed, suggested Lieutenant ZYXI, though his forearms moved nervously across his control panels. The docking procedure took nearly an hour. Coalition vessels used quantum entanglement ports that could phase lock instantly, but the humans requested old-fashioned mechanical docking clamps. The sounds of metal grinding against metal echoed through the station as the primitive coupling systems engaged. When the airlock finally cycled open, Veltar's hopes plummeted like a meteor hitting atmosphere. The first human to emerge stood barely 6 feet tall, shorter than most coalition species. Her skin looked impossibly thin, showing blue vessels underneath that would be vulnerable to the slightest scratch. She had strange patches of brown fur only on the top of her head, and tiny eyes that seemed almost useless compared to the advanced optical organs of other galactic races. "Captain Jenny Walsh, 82nd Airborne," she said, extending a soft ping appendage toward Veltar. Her voice carried no harmonic frequencies, no subsonic commands, no pheromone releases, just simple sound waves that seemed almost primitive. Behind her emerged more of the creatures. They all shared the same basic characteristics: soft skin in various pale shades, minimal body armor that looked like it couldn't stop a sharp stick, and small physical frames that would snap under the weight of standard coalition equipment. Some had yellow fur on their heads, others had black or brown. A few had strange markings on their skin that appeared to be decorative rather than functional. "Welcome to Kepler Station," Veltar managed, his form flickering with barely concealed disappointment. "I am Admiral Veltar of the Galactic Defense Coalition." The human captain performed what appeared to be a greeting ritual, grasping his crystalline appendage with a soft flesh. Remarkably, she showed no discomfort despite the fact that his body temperature ran hot enough to melt most organic materials. "Pleasure to meet you, Admiral. Where do you need us deployed?" Veltar studied the humans filing out of their transport. They carried what looked like antique projectile weapons, simple metal tubes that fired small chunks of matter using chemical explosives. No energy beams, no plasma cannons, no molecular disruptors. Their body armor appeared to be made from woven fibers rather than hardened ceramics or energy fields. "Are you certain you understand what you're facing?" he asked carefully. "The Vector are not typical enemies. They stand 12 feet tall, possess natural armor that deflects our best weapons, and secrete acid that can dissolve steel. They hunt in coordinated swarms of thousands." A male human named Bobby stepped forward, adjusting what appeared to be a primitive communication device attached to his ear. 12-foot bugs with armor plating and acid blood. Pack hunters with hive intelligence. Vulnerable to kinetic impact and extreme temperature variations. We read the tactical briefing on the way in. Another human, this one called Rick, was examining his weapon with the sort of casual attention someone might give to a garden tool. "Standard operating procedure for hostile arthropods," he said conversationally. "When do we get started?" Commander Frixkai's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. "These creatures cannot be serious. Look at them. They have no natural weapons, no armor, no apparent defensive capabilities whatsoever." The human captain turned toward the Mantry commander with what Veltar was learning to recognize as their species' version of a friendly expression, a slight upward curve of the mouth that revealed small white bone fragments they apparently used for food processing. "No offense, Commander, but you folks called for help. We came. Either you want us or you don't." A few more humans emerged from the transport, including a female named Patricia who immediately began setting up some sort of communication equipment, and a male called James who started distributing what appeared to be small explosive devices to his companions. They moved with an efficiency that suggested extensive training, but their equipment looked like museum pieces. "Perhaps you should observe our defensive positions first," Veltar suggested diplomatically. "Learn our combat protocols, understand our weapon systems." The human captain shook her head, apparently another gesture indicating disagreement. "Admiral, with respect, we've been fighting hostile life forms since before we discovered fire. Point us toward the enemy and let us do what we came here to do." The casual confidence in her voice sent an odd vibration through Veltar's crystalline structure. These creatures spoke as if facing a galactic threat was just another day's work. The first warning came at 0600 station time when long-range sensors detected a massive biosignature approaching from the asteroid belt. Admiral Veltar's crystalline form pulsed bright orange as he watched the tactical display. 3 Vector bioships, each the size of a battle cruiser, moved through space like enormous beetles swimming through dark water. Their chitinous hulls gleamed with an oily sheen, and sensor readings showed thousands of life forms packed inside each vessel. "All stations to combat alert," Veltar commanded. "Activate defensive grid and prepare for siege protocol." Throughout Kepler Station, Coalition forces moved with practiced efficiency. The massive Krillian shock troopers took positions at critical choke points, their natural armor gleaming under emergency lighting. Zephyrian technicians powered up energy barrier generators that created shimmering walls of force across major corridors. Mantry warriors deployed their plasma cannons at strategic firing positions, while Sorak heavy weapons teams set up molecular disruptors near the main docking bays. The humans, however, were nowhere to be seen. "Where are the Terran forces?" Veltar asked Lieutenant ZYXI as the first Vector drop pods began launching from the bioships. Captain Walsh requested access to the maintenance tunnel system. "Sir," she said they wanted to scout ahead before the main assault. Veltar's form flickered with confusion. The maintenance tunnels were barely large enough for a single coalition member to crawl through, and most of them led to dead ends or vital system junctions that would be death traps if the Vector broke through. The first wave hit the station's outer hull like living meteors. Vector drop pods, actually specialized organisms that could survive the vacuum of space, slammed into docking bays and observation decks. Each pod split open with a wet, organic sound, releasing 6 to 8 warrior cars Vector that immediately began cutting through hull plating with their acid saliva. "Energy barriers holding on levels 12 through 15, reported Commander Thrixkai from his position overlooking the main defense line. "Plasma cannon batteries engaging targets." The Coalition forces performed exactly as their training dictated. They established killing fields with overlapping fire zones, coordinated their weapons to create maximum damage, and called in orbital support from the battle cruiser Harmony's edge. It was textbook military doctrine: hold defensive positions, maintain communication, preserve resources for the long battle ahead. But the Vector weren't following any textbook. The insectoid warriors moved with terrifying intelligence, adapting their assault patterns within minutes of encountering Coalition defenses. When plasma fire proved effective, they began using their fallen comrades as shields. When energy barriers blocked their advance, they found ventilation shafts and service corridors to bypass the defenses entirely. "Sir, we're losing contact with perimeter teams," reported a nervous Zephyrian technician. "Biosignatures are just disappearing." Veltar studied the tactical display with growing alarm. Red dots representing Vector forces were vanishing from the screen one by one, but there were no combat reports, no weapons fire, no explosion signatures. The creatures were simply ceasing to exist. "Could it be sensor malfunction?" asked Commander Thrixkai. "Negative. Life sign monitors are functioning normally. The Vector are being eliminated, but by what?" For 3 hours, this mysterious phenomenon continued. Coalition forces held their positions, waiting for the massive assault that military doctrine said must be coming. The Vector bioships continued launching drop pods, but fewer and fewer warriors were actually making it to the defensive lines. "Admiral," called out Patricia, the human communications specialist who had remained at her station in the command center. Captain Walsh on internal comms. The transmission crackled with static and what sounded like distant combat noises. "Velta, this is Walsh. Perimeter's clear on sectors 7 through 12. Found their main staging area in sublevel 7. They won't be using it anymore." Before Velta could respond, humans began emerging from air vents, maintenance hatches, and service corridors throughout the station. They crawled out of spaces that should have been impossible for any living creature to navigate, covered head to toe in green and black alien blood that steamed slightly in the station's atmosphere. Bobby pulled himself through a ceiling vent that was barely 18 inches wide, somehow managing to drag what appeared to be a Vector limb behind him. Rick emerged from a floor hatch carrying improvised weapons made from station components, a plasma cutter attached to a metal strut, electrical cables wrapped around chunks of debris. "Holy stars," whispered Commander Thrixkai. "They've been hunting the Vector through the infrastructure itself." Captain Walsh dropped from a ventilation shaft directly into Command Center, landing with surprising grace despite being covered in alien gore. Her primitive projectile weapon had been modified with what looked like pieces of Vector carapace attached to the barrel. "Turns out these bugs really don't like enclosed spaces," she reported casually, wiping green blood from her face. "They are used to open field tactics. Get them into tight corridors where they can't coordinate with a hive mind, and they panic like any other animal." James appeared behind her, carrying what Veltar realized was a Vector communication organ, the biological equivalent of a radio transmitter that the creatures use to coordinate their swarm intelligence. "Found this in their command bug," he said, dropping the still-twitching organ onto a nearby table. "Figured you science types might want to study it." The tactical display now showed the truth of what had happened. While coalition forces prepared for conventional warfare, the humans had turned Kepler Station itself into a weapon, using the Vector's own biology and pack-hunting instincts against them. They had transformed maintenance tunnels into hunting grounds and service corridors into killing fields. "How many did you eliminate?" Veltar asked, his crystalline structure pulsing with amazement. "All of them," Walsh replied simply. "Well, all the ones that made it inside the station anyway." The Vector bioships opened like blooming flowers of death, each one releasing a black cloud of warriors that blotted out the stars. Admiral Veltar watched in horror as his sensors counted the incoming force, over 2 million individual Vector drones, warrior casts, and specialist breeds descending on Kepler Station like a living asteroid field. "All batteries, open fire," he commanded, his crystalline form blazing with emergency light. The Coalition's most advanced weapons lit up space with deadly beauty. Plasma cannons sent streams of superheated matter into the swarm while particle beam arrays carved geometric patterns through the enemy ranks. Energy torpedoes detonated in brilliant flashes, each explosion taking out dozens of the chitinous aliens. But for every Vector that fell, 10 more took its place. "Defensive lines failing on decks 15 through 20, reported Commander Thrixkai, his mandibles clicking rapidly with stress. "The Sorak heavy weapons teams are being overrun." Through the command center's viewing ports, Veltar could see the battle raging across the station's hull. Massive Krillian shock troopers, each standing 9 feet tall with natural armor thick enough to stop laser fire, were being torn apart by swarms of Vector warriors. The aliens moved like a single organism, flowing around defensive positions and striking at weak points with surgical precision. "So, we're reading complete atmospheric breach on the lower levels," reported a Zephyrian technician, his synthetic voice cracking with static from damaged systems. "Toxic gas leaks in sectors 12 through 16. Radiation levels in the reactor housing are beyond lethal limits." Veltar's worst fears were coming true. The station was breaking apart under the assault, and soon they would have to order a full evacuation. The Coalition fleet could glass the entire facility from orbit, but that would mean abandoning any hope of stopping the Vector advance toward the inner systems. "Admiral," came Captain Walsh's voice over the communicator, somehow perfectly calm despite the chaos erupting around them. "We're moving to offensive positions." "Offensive?" Veltar's form flickered with confusion. "Captain, we're barely holding defensive lines. This is not the time for dash. Actually, sir, This is exactly the time. Through the smoke and debris, Veltar watched something that defied every principle of military science he had ever learned. While coalition forces fell back to more defensible positions, the humans moved forward into the worst of the fighting. Private Kevin Peterson disappeared into a section where a plasma conduit had ruptured, filling the corridor with gases that would dissolve the lungs of most species within seconds. Instead of dying, he emerged 20 minutes later behind a group of Vectar warriors, having somehow survived the toxic environment and used the chemical clouds as cover for a flanking maneuver. Sergeant Lucy Davis ran out of ammunition for her primitive projectile weapon while defending a critical junction. Rather than retreating, she began mixing cleaning fluids from a nearby maintenance closet, creating improvised explosives that sent chunks of Vectar carapace flying in all directions. The aliens had never encountered chemical warfare before and scattered in confusion as their own acid blood mixed with human-made compounds. But it was Corporal Tony Martinez who truly demonstrated what Veltar was beginning to understand as the human advantage. Surrounded by 12 Vectar warriors in what should have been a hopeless situation, the human didn't surrender or fight defensively. Instead, he grabbed the nearest alien drone and deliberately triggered its acid glands, using the creature's own blood as a cutting tool to burn through a bulkhead. The improvised escape route caught the Vectar completely off guard. They had never faced an enemy that would willingly expose themselves to acid in order to gain tactical advantage. "They are fighting in conditions that would kill our best warriors," Commander Thrixkai observed with something approaching awe. "How are they surviving?" The answer came when Captain Walsh led a strike team directly toward the largest Vectar bioship. While Coalition doctrine called for long-range bombardment and defensive positioning, the humans somehow convinced the ship's security systems to lower the boarding shield by mimicking Vectar biosignatures. "How did they accomplish that?" asked Lieutenant ZYX-High. "They cover themselves in Vectar blood and organ fluids," Patricia reported from her monitoring station. "The bioship thinks they are returning warriors." Once inside the living vessel, the humans moved through its organic corridors like they had been born in such nightmarish conditions. The ship's interior was a maze of digestive chambers, breeding pools, and neural networks that pulsed with alien intelligence. The temperature reached levels that would cook most coalition species, while the atmosphere contained acid particles that dissolved equipment within minutes. The humans adapted. Bobby Rodriguez used the ship's own digestive acids to corrode through support structures. Jenny Walsh identified the central nervous cluster and convinced it to interpret human presence as friendly biomatter. Rick Thompson actually communicated with the ship's biological computers, somehow convincing them that the vessel was under attack by Coalition forces when it was actually being destroyed from within. The bioship died like a living creature, its death screams echoing across space as critical systems failed in cascade. The remaining Vectar forces, suddenly cut off from their command structure, began fighting as individuals rather than a coordinated swarm. "Impossible," whispered Veltar as he watched the tide of battle turn. "They are treating this nightmare scenario like a routine operation." Captain Walsh's voice came through the communicator one final time, slightly out of breath but still steady. "Admiral, hostile bioship is down. Remaining enemy forces are fragmenting. Should we continue pursuit?" For the first time since the crisis began, Veltar's crystalline form pulsed with something other than fear. These creatures from the Class 12 Deathworld hadn't just survived the impossible, they had made it look easy. The silence that followed the battle was more terrifying than the fighting itself. Admiral Veltar's sensors showed something that had never been recorded in galactic military history: Vectar bioships retreating, not regrouping, not repositioning for another attack, but actually fleeing from a battlefield. The massive insectoid vessels moved away from Kepler Station with what could only be described as panic. Their organic hulls pulsed with distress signals as they fired emergency biorockets to achieve maximum escape velocity. The hive mind that had conquered dozens of star systems was sending frantic neural broadcasts that roughly translated to unknown threat and survival imperative. "They are running," whispered Commander Thrixkai, his compound eyes tracking the retreating fleet. "The Vectar swarm is actually running away." Through the observation deck shattered windows, Veltar watched the human survivors emerge from the wreckage. What he saw defied every principle of military medicine and combat psychology he had ever studied. The humans had taken casualties that should have broken any fighting force, over 60% wounded, equipment destroyed, uniforms torn and blood-soaked. Yet they were regrouping for another engagement. Private Kevin Peterson limped out of a collapsed section with what appeared to be a severe leg injury, but he was already checking his weapon and counting ammunition. Sergeant Lucia Davis had burn marks across half her face from acid exposure, yet she was helping other wounded soldiers and organizing medical supplies. Corporal Tony Martinez emerged from the bio-ship wreckage carrying 2 unconscious Coalition soldiers, a Zephyr and a Mantry, that he had somehow rescued during the final assault. Medical teams to the landing bay, Veltar ordered, but Captain Walsh's voice stopped him. "Admiral, we can handle our own wounded. Your medical staff should focus on Coalition casualties." Veltar watched in amazement as the humans began treating their injuries with primitive but effective field medicine. They used torn clothing as bandages, improvised splints from debris, and somehow managed to stabilize critical patients using nothing but basic training and determination. "Captain Walsh," he said formally, his crystalline structure pulsing with deep respect. "The Galactic Defense Coalition hereby offers you and your entire force permanent positions within our military command structure. You would hold the rank of Strategic Combat Advisors with full authority to train our forces in your unique methods." The human captain performed that strange facial expression again, the upward curve that Veltar now understood indicated pleasure rather than aggression. "We'd be honored, Admiral. Though I should warn you, our training methods might seem a bit extreme by galactic standards." Within hours, news of the human victory spread across the galactic communication network like wildfire. The initial reports were dismissed as impossible. A single battalion of primitives from an unknown world had defeated the Vectar swarm? Ridiculous. But then the tactical recordings began circulating. Species throughout the galaxy watched in stunned silence as humans fought in conditions that would instantly kill most known life forms. The footage showed Bobby Rodriguez crawling through acid-filled ventilation shafts, Jenny Walsh communicating with hostile biotechnology, and Rick Thompson using environmental hazards as weapons against enemies 3 times his size. The Krillian Empire, whose warriors prided themselves on their natural armor and strength, requested immediate access to human training programs. How do these soft creatures survive impacts that would shatter our carapaces? Their military commander asked in an official transmission. The Zephyrian Collective, masters of technology and tactical analysis, sent teams of scientists to study human physiology. Their neural processing capabilities under extreme stress exceed our computational models, reported their lead researcher. They appear to function better in crisis situations than in normal conditions. Even the energy-based Lamina, who existed as pure consciousness and had never understood physical combat, sent ambassadors to learn about human tactical thinking. They demonstrate problem-solving abilities that transcend their technological limitations, the Lamina observed. This suggests a form of intelligence we have not previously encountered. Most remarkable was a response from the Sorak Empire. These reptilian warriors had built their civilization on the principle that only the strongest survive, yet their war chief sent a personal message. "These humans possess the spirit of true predators. We request permission to learn from them." Admiral Veltar found himself coordinating not military reinforcement requests, but educational exchange programs. Every major civilization wanted to understand how creatures from a Class 12 death world had accomplished the impossible. "So," reported Lieutenant ZYXI, "we're receiving over 400 requests for human military advisors. The demand is exceeding supply by a factor of 50 to 1. Captain Walsh, now wearing the insignia of a Coalition strategic advisor, studied the request queue with interest. Looks like we'll need to expand our recruitment efforts back on Earth." The quantum communication array activated, sending messages toward that distant, dangerous world. But these weren't desperate calls for reinforcements anymore. They were invitations for teachers, requests for mentors who could show the galaxy how to survive in a universe that was apparently much more hostile than anyone had previously imagined. "What should we tell them about the nature of this assignment?" asked the communications officer. Walsh looked out at the stars, where scattered Vectar bioships were still fleeing toward unknown space. "Tell them it's a routine training mission," she said with that strange human expression. "Nothing they haven't seen before." As the message streaked across space toward Earth, Veltar realized that the galaxy had just learned a fundamental truth. What they considered a hostile, dangerous universe, humans simply called Tuesday, *, the END*.